The sun barely pierced the thick southern humidity as Nia Roberts, a black female defense attorney, pulled into the parking lot of Branton's municipal courthouse. Her sedan, a dependable yet unremarkable car, blended into the lot filled with vehicles owned by the city's lawyers, clerks, and officers. Nia had already been awake for hours, handling an emergency eviction case for a single mother of three, a fight that left her heart heavy but her resolve firm. Today, however, she was here for herself. A jaywalking ticket. The absurdity of it still made her chest tighten. It wasn't the $75 fine that bothered her. It was the principle. The citation was issued in a recently gentrified neighborhood where black residents were routinely harassed for existing in public spaces. She had crossed an empty street on a quiet morning, but the officer's disdainful look told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't about the law, it was about her. Dressed in a sharp navy blazer over a white blouse, Nia adjusted her locks in the rearview mirror and grabbed her briefcase. She knew the court's reputation, a place where Judge Harold Whitaker, an older white man known for his ironclad rules and dismissive attitude toward minorities, reigned supreme. As she walked toward the courthouse, she reminded herself why she fought, for the countless black women like her who had been silenced and dismissed. Inside the municipal courthouse, the air was thick with tension. Defendants shuffled nervously on wooden benches, while clerks typed away, their fingers clicking loudly against the quiet murmur of voices. Nia scanned the room and immediately noticed the unspoken divisions. On one side, white defendants in business attire sat upright, their papers neatly arranged. On the other, black and Latino individuals slouched, their eyes darting anxiously. The bailiff, a burly white man with a permanent scowl, noticed Nia enter. His gaze lingered, not with recognition, but with skepticism. Another one of those high and mighty types, he muttered under his breath, loud enough for a nearby officer to chuckle. Nia ignored the comment and took a seat near the back. She knew better than to react. Her silence wasn't submission, but strategy. A shield she had perfected over years of enduring microaggressions. At the bench sat Judge Harold Whitaker, a relic of a bygone era. His reputation for harsh sentences and bias against minorities preceded him. He was efficient, cold, and unyielding. The way his thin lips pressed together as he listened to defendants made it clear he viewed them not as people, but as disruptions to his meticulously scheduled day. As the session began, Nia watched intently. The disparities were glaring. A white man who admitted to driving 15 miles over the speed limit received a warning after a friendly lecture about responsibility. Minutes later, a black woman with an expired registration was fined $500 and berated for neglecting her civic duties. Each ruling was a study in bias, and Nia's anger simmered quietly beneath her composed exterior. When the clerk called her name, Nia stood and approached the bench. Her steps were measured, her posture straight. She had faced countless judges before, but the oppressive atmosphere in this courtroom was different. "Miss Roberts," Judge Whitaker began, barely glancing at her. His tone was curt, almost dismissive. "You're late." "Your Honor, I apologize for my tardiness," Nia replied, her voice calm but firm. "I was assisting a client facing an emergency eviction." Whitaker cut her off with a wave of his hand. "I've no interest in your excuses. This court operates on strict rules, and tardiness is a sign of disrespect." Nia's jaw tightened, but she refused to break composure. "Your Honor, if I may," the judge's voice grew louder, silencing her. "You may not. Contempt of court will not be tolerated. I am imposing a fine of $1,000. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Nia's stomach churned, but she stood tall. "Your Honor, I respectfully request the opportunity to address the court." Whitaker leaned back in his chair, his expression one of exaggerated patience. "Fine. Speak." "I've observed this morning that other late defendants, primarily white individuals, were treated with leniency," Nia said, her voice steady but cutting. "Yet my fine is disproportionate. I question whether this ruling reflects my actions or something else entirely." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Whitaker's face turned crimson. "Are you accusing this court of bias?" he demanded. "I am presenting facts," Nia replied. Facts that I am prepared to document and share with the Judicial Review Board. During the court's scheduled recess, Nia stepped into the hallway to collect herself. The tension of the morning clung to her, and she needed a moment to recalibrate. As she stood by a water fountain sipping from a paper cup, she heard the bailiff's voice behind her. "You really think you're something, don't you?" he sneered. "Coming in here with your fancy briefcase, acting like you're above the rest of them." Nia turned slowly, her expression neutral, but her heart pounding. "Excuse me?" she said, her tone measured. "Don't play dumb," he continued, stepping closer. "You think that judge is going to let some little black girl like you make a fool out of him? You're just another troublemaker." The words hit her like a punch to the gut, but Nia refused to show any reaction. Years of enduring similar comments had taught her how to mask her hurt. "I'm here to seek justice," she said quietly, "not your approval." The bailiff laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Justice? In this town? You're dreaming, sweetheart." As he walked away, Nia's hands clenched into fists. The weight of the morning pressed down on her, but she forced herself to take a deep breath. She couldn't let them win. Straightening her blazer, she returned to the courtroom, more determined than ever. When court resumed, Nia stood again before the bench. This time, she carried a leather folder. "Your Honor," she began, her voice resonating with quiet authority, "I feel it is necessary to properly introduce myself. For the record, I am attorney Nia Roberts, a licensed member of the state bar and a defense attorney specializing in civil rights." The courtroom fell silent. Whitaker's smug expression faltered for the first time. Nia continued, "I have spent years documenting patterns of discrimination in this courthouse, and today I have witnessed further evidence of bias. I intend to file a formal complaint with the Judicial Review Board." Gasps echoed through the room. The judge's face turned pale, then flushed with anger. "You dare threaten this court?" "Not a threat, Your Honor. A promise." Nia stood unwavering before the court as she reached into her leather folder and pulled out a stack of documents. "Your Honor," she began, her tone calm but cutting, "these records detail cases from the past 3 years in this courtroom. They highlight a clear pattern of disproportionately harsh fines and sentences imposed on black defendants compared to their white counterparts for similar infractions." The judge's eyes narrowed as he attempted to mask his discomfort. "This is absurd," Whitaker said, his voice rising. "You cannot undermine the integrity of this court with baseless accusations." "These are not baseless," Nia replied, raising her voice slightly to match his. She flipped open a chart showing side-by-side comparisons. For instance, a white male defendant charged with driving without insurance received a $100 fine and a warning. On the same day, a black female defendant with the same charge was fined $750 and threatened with contempt. These discrepancies are consistent across hundreds of cases. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Whitaker's face reddened, but he doubled down. "Every case is unique. These comparisons lack context," Nia pressed forward. "Then perhaps you can explain why black women account for over 60% of contempt charges in your courtroom, while representing less than 20% of defendants? Or why leniency is extended almost exclusively to white defendants?" Whitaker's hands gripped the edges of his bench. "Enough! This is not the time or place for this discussion." "It's exactly the time and place," Nia shot back, "because justice is being denied here, in this courtroom, under your watch." The judge's voice faltered. "I have always acted within the bounds of the law." "The bounds of the law?" Nia interrupted, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Justice is not about the bounds of the law. It's about fairness, equality, and impartiality. And today, your actions have made a mockery of those principles." A stunned silence filled the courtroom. For a moment, Whitaker looked as if he might attempt to speak again, but the weight of Nia's words and the damning evidence before him rendered him speechless. His composure cracked, and he slumped slightly in his chair, his authority crumbling before everyone's eyes. Just as the tension in the room reached its peak, the back doors of the courtroom swung open. A tall man in a dark suit stepped inside, his authoritative presence immediately commanding attention. It was Elliot Carter, a senior judge from the state's Judicial Review Board. His arrival was unannounced, but far from coincidental. "Your Honor," Carter said, addressing Whitaker with a measured tone, I've been observing today's proceedings quietly from the gallery. Whitaker's face drained of color. Judge Carter, I wasn't aware you were in attendance. That was intentional, Carter replied sharply, stepping forward. He carried a thick dossier, which he placed on the bench before Whitaker. This file contains the results of an independent investigation conducted by my office. It corroborates everything Attorney Roberts has presented, and more. The courtroom erupted into murmurs again as Carter opened the dossier. For the past 6 months, my team has reviewed hundreds of cases from this courtroom. The findings are damning. The data reveals systematic racial bias in sentencing and fines, all under your purview. Whitaker's lips quivered as he attempted to speak. This court has always acted with what? Carter interjected coldly. Impartiality? Fairness? Because the numbers and testimonies paint a very different picture. This is not a court of justice, Judge Whitaker. It's a court of discrimination masquerading as law and order. Nia watched silently, her chest tight with vindication. Whitaker's defiance crumbled further as Carter flipped through pages of evidence, reading aloud instances of egregious disparities. In one case, Carter continued, a black defendant was fined $1,200 for a minor infraction, while a white defendant with an identical charge was fined $100. These are not isolated incidents, Your Honor. They are patterns, and they are inexcusable. Whitaker's shoulders slumped and he seemed to shrink under Carter's stern gaze. The courtroom was utterly silent, every person fixated on the scene unfolding. Carter closed the dossier with a decisive snap. Judge Whitaker, your actions have not only tarnished this courtroom, but have eroded public trust in the justice system. Effective immediately, you are relieved of your duties pending further disciplinary action. The gallery erupted into applause, a cathartic release of pent-up frustration and anger. Whitaker sat frozen, his authority stripped away in a single moment. The video of Nia's confrontation with Whitaker, recorded discreetly by a young black woman in the audience, went viral within hours. The footage showed the judge berating her while she stood composed, exposing the disparity in his treatment of defendants. Social media erupted with outrage. Civil rights organizations amplified the story, demanding an investigation. Former defendants came forward, sharing their experiences of disproportionate fines and harsh lectures in Whitaker's courtroom. The Judicial Review Board launched an investigation, uncovering decades of discriminatory practices in Whitaker's court. Data revealed that black women were fined 3 times more often than white defendants for similar infractions. Whitaker was forced to resign. Mandatory racial bias training was implemented for all court staff, and a community oversight committee was established to monitor judicial practices. Months later, Nia stood before a group of law students sharing her story. Change doesn't come from silence, she said. It comes from standing up, even when the odds are against you. Nia's impact, however, reached far beyond the courtroom. She had become a symbol of resilience and justice for black women across the nation. Organizations invited her to speak about her experiences, and community groups looked to her for leadership. For many black women who had felt invisible in a system designed to overlook them, Nia became a beacon of hope. Her message was clear. Life's injustices can weigh heavy, but they can also fuel our strength. The fight for fairness is never easy, but it's necessary. Even in the face of adversity, when we stand firm with integrity and courage, we have the power to inspire change. Nia spent her days mentoring young attorneys and supporting initiatives for judicial reform. She often reminded those she worked with, justice isn't just an ideal. It's a commitment to treating every person with dignity. The Branton courthouse was no longer a symbol of fear, but of progress. A plaque honoring Nia's stand was installed, reminding everyone who entered that justice must serve all, not just the privileged. Beneath it were engraved her words, "The fight for justice is the fight for humanity. With strong hearts and unwavering principles, we can shape a better tomorrow." Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please support me by clicking the logo in the bottom right corner to subscribe to my channel. This way you won't miss any of the exciting stories coming up. Thank you so much.